The theater lights dimmed slowly, and a low murmur rolled through the audience as the next act was announced. From backstage, the members of Lightwire stood shoulder to shoulder, their LED suits dark for now, their faces lit only by the faint glow of the stage monitor. You could see nerves in their eyes, but beneath that was something stronger, years of sacrifice, late-night rehearsals, and dreams carried all the way from the Philippines to this moment. One deep breath passed through the group like a silent signal. This was it. As they stepped onto the AGT stage, the crowd leaned forward, curious. Without the lights switched on, they looked almost ordinary, just a group of young dancers standing in silence. Simon Cowell studied them carefully, arms crossed. Howie tilted his head, intrigued. Sophia smiled encouragingly, while the room waited, unsure of what was coming. The host finished the introduction, and suddenly, the music began, not loud, not dramatic, just a soft, pulsing beat that felt like a heartbeat. In perfect unison, the LEDs flickered to life. A ripple of gasps swept through the theater as lines of light traced their movements, turning simple steps into glowing shapes in the darkness. Every motion felt precise, intentional, as if the light itself was dancing. The choreography wasn't just about sharp moves, it was storytelling. Waves of color flowed from one dancer to another, symbolizing connection, struggle, and unity. When one performer stepped forward, the others dimmed, creating the feeling of isolation. When they rejoined, the lights exploded back into brightness, stronger together than alone. The audience was silent now, completely locked in. Phones stopped moving, judges stopped writing notes. Even Simon leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable but focused. As the tempo increased, the dancers' confidence grew. The lights changed with the music, cool blues shifting into fiery reds, then warm golds that filled the entire stage. Every beat landed cleanly. Every formation transition felt effortless. Midway through the performance, the music softened again, and the lights narrowed into thin, trembling lines. One dancer stood alone in the center, his suit glowing faintly, while the others moved around him like shadows. The moment felt emotional, almost vulnerable, as if the group was sharing a personal story without words, a story of being unseen, of struggling to be noticed, of carrying hope through darkness. In the crowd, a few people wiped their eyes without even realizing why. Then everything changed. The beat dropped harder, faster, and the lights burst into full intensity. The dancers exploded into motion, spinning, jumping, and forming impossible patterns of light that seemed to float in midair. Circles became wings. Lines became flames. The stage felt bigger, brighter, alive. Cheers erupted as the energy climbed higher and higher. This wasn't just a dance anymore, it was a spectacle, a declaration. As the final seconds approached, the choreography tightened, movements hitting with laser-sharp precision. The lights pulsed one last time, synchronized perfectly with the final beat. Then, blackout. For half a second, there was nothing. And then the theater erupted. The audience jumped to their feet, applause crashing like thunder. Shouts echoed from every corner of the room. The dancers stood frozen, breathing hard, their suits slowly glowing back to life as they realized what was happening. On the judges' panel, reactions were written clearly on their faces. Howie's mouth was open in disbelief. Sophia clapped wildly, standing all ready. Simon Cowell didn't speak, he just stared at the stage, thoughtful, as if something deep had shifted. The moment hung in the air, electric, emotional, unforgettable. The applause refused to fade, rolling through the theater in relentless waves as Lightwire stood at the center of the stage, hands clasped tightly together. Their chests rose and fell, not just from the performance, but from the realization that something extraordinary had just happened. Golden lights from the ceiling washed over them, replacing the darkness they had just commanded, and for a brief moment they looked stunned, like people who had stepped into a dream and weren't sure if they were allowed to stay. When the judges finally began to speak, the room quieted, though the energy still hummed in the air. Terry Crews stepped closer, smiling broadly, clearly moved. He congratulated them, his voice full of admiration, and asked how it felt to bring such a powerful performance to the AGT stage. One of the dancers stepped forward, his voice trembling as he spoke about representing their country, about years of being told their dream was too big, too impossible. The others nodded, eyes shining, as he explained that light was their symbol, hope in darkness, unity in struggle. Howie Mandel was the first judge to respond. He leaned into his microphone, shaking his head slowly in disbelief. He talked about how he had seen many dance acts, many visual performances, but this felt different. This felt emotional. He admitted that for a moment, he forgot he was judging and simply watched as a fan. The crowd cheered, and the dancers exchanged glances, their smiles growing wider. Sofia Vergara followed, standing up again just to clap once more. She spoke passionately, praising not just the technology or the choreography, but the heart behind it. She said she could feel their story even without words, and that was the hardest thing to achieve on a stage like this. Her voice softened as she told them they made her emotional, and one of the dancers covered his mouth, overwhelmed. All eyes then turned to Simon Cowell. He sat back in his chair, silent for a few seconds, letting the tension stretch. The audience leaned forward, the dancers held their breath. Simon finally spoke, his tone calm but serious. He said that performances like this were the reason the show existed. That it wasn't about tricks or effects, it was about making people feel something. He admitted he had been skeptical at first, but within seconds, that skepticism disappeared. The room was so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the stage lights. Simon paused again, looking directly at the group. He told them their performance was not just memorable, it was meaningful. He asked how long they had worked to reach this moment. When they answered, years, his expression softened. He nodded slowly, as if weighing a decision that could change lives. The audience began to sense what was coming. Whispers spread, cheers started early, hopeful, almost pleading. The dancers stood frozen, gripping each other's hands so tightly their knuckles turned white. One of them wiped away tears before they could fall, while another stared at Simon, barely blinking. Simon stood up. The theater exploded before he even said a word. Simon raised his hand, signaling for quiet, and the noise dropped instantly. He looked at the dancers one last time and said that moments like this don't come often, that when they do, you have to trust your instinct. Then he turned and slammed the golden buzzer. Gold confetti burst from above, flooding the stage in a storm of light and celebration. The music swelled as the crowd screamed in pure joy. Light wire collapsed into each other, crying openly now, disbelief written across every face. Some fell to their knees. Others looked up at the raining gold, hands shaking, laughter and tears blending into one. Simon smiled, a rare, genuine smile, as he watched them celebrate. Terry rushed onto the stage, hugging each dancer, shouting congratulations over the noise. The moment felt unreal, frozen in time, as if the universe had decided to pause just long enough to honor a dream that refused to die. Under the golden rain, Light Wire didn't just win a buzzer, they won the world's attention. The gold confetti still floated through the air long after the noise began to settle, clinging to the stage lights and drifting across the judge's desk like glittering snow. Light Wire stood in the center of it all, trying to absorb what had just happened. Their hands trembled as they hugged one another again and again, as if letting go might make the moment disappear. The golden buzzer emblem glowed behind them, larger than life, a symbol they had watched on screens for years and never believed would shine their way. Backstage, emotions finally broke free. Some of the dancers sat on the floor, laughing uncontrollably through tears. Others called home, voices cracking as they tried to explain the impossible. On the other end of those calls were parents, siblings, and friends who had stayed up late back in the Philippines, watching with hope and prayer. When the words, "Golden Buzzer," finally landed, screams of joy poured through the phones. Years of doubt, sacrifice, and quiet struggle suddenly felt worth it. As the adrenaline faded, reality slowly stepped in. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Producers congratulated them, explaining what came next, but the words blurred together. All they could think about was the journey that had brought them here. Long nights rehearsing in cramped spaces. Borrowed equipment. Jobs taken just to fund costumes and travel. Moments when quitting felt easier than believing. Every setback replayed in their minds, now reframed as steps that led to this stage. Later that evening, the group gathered in a quiet corner, finally alone. No cameras, no crowd, just them. One dancer spoke softly, reminding everyone of the promise they made years ago, to dance not for fame, but to tell stories that mattered. Another added that this moment wasn't just theirs, it belonged to every kid who felt invisible, every dreamer told they were unrealistic. They placed their hands together, a silent vow to stay grounded, to stay united, no matter what followed. News of the golden buzzer spread fast. Clips of their performance flooded social media, captions filled with words like, "goosebumps," "masterpiece," and "unforgettable." Messages poured in from around the world, strangers thanking them for making them feel something, for reminding them that art could still surprise. The dancers read these comments late into the night, stunned that their light had reached people they would never meet. In the days that followed, rehearsals resumed with renewed intensity. The pressure was higher now. Expectations heavier. But instead of fear, there was focus. They pushed harder, refined details, explored new ways to blend emotion with technology. The golden buzzer wasn't a finish line, it was a responsibility. They wanted to prove that Simon's instinct was right, that their story was only getting started. On quiet mornings, some of them would stand alone on the practice floor, lights off, imagining the next stage. They pictured bigger audiences, brighter lights, and moments even more powerful than the first. But they also remembered where they came from, the humble beginnings that shaped their hunger and heart. That memory kept them steady. When they finally returned to the AGT stage weeks later, they walked with a different energy. Not arrogance, not fear, confidence earned through struggle. As the lights dimmed once again, they exchanged a final look, no words needed. Whatever happened next, they had already changed their lives. They had arrived as hopeful performers. They moved forward as artists with a voice, carrying light not just in their suits, but in everything they stood for.